So you may think you know the NBA, but you don't really know this game until you know the numbers behind what's happening back there on the court. Hey everybody, it's Todd Bishop from GeekWire, the host of the Numbers Geek podcast. We're going to be going behind the scenes of the NBA with LA Clippers owner Steve Ballmer and two of his Numbers Geeks coming up next.
Our department acts a lot as an internal consultancy within the Clippers for our basketball operations department, whether it's the front office or the coaching staff. And we've tried to kind of provide data and analysis of that data around any decision that really gets made, just so that we're informed from a numeric standpoint. With the coaching staff, that can vary from just a pregame report, opponent strength, statistical strengths and weaknesses, to kind of lineup numbers, what lineups are working, what combinations aren't. Team reviews every 10 games to see how we can change up our strategy to better help the team. On the front office side, a lot of that is kind of evaluating potential transactions, salary cap scenarios, and in that respect.
That's right. So, Greg, why don't you give us a sense for how your role fits in there?
So working underneath Judd and with everybody else in the department, just doing a lot of the computer programming behind it. We get data from different vendors as well as the NBA that we set up pretty much automated tasks to, and models as well, to kind of evaluate and register like player team performance and trying to do some predictions off of that.
That's right. So Steve, we've talked about the stats that you look at in an NBA game when you're out there, even on the court, looking on your phone. Tell me how you use the numbers that are generated by your team here.
Okay, so now these dudes is a whole level different than me, looking at my phone. So I'd say there's three things. Number one, the details of what works and what doesn't work, which combinations on other team. I don't really get into that. That's really with these guys, coaching staff, quite a bit. The second area where we have worked a little bit together is our Court Vision product, because the vendor, Second Spectrum, who's building it, I met completely through these guys. They're an analytics vendor. Judd introduced me to them when I first started with the team. And it's taken that technology a different direction, but they're still one of our key vendors on the research and analytics side. The third area, I would say, I get a lot from these guys. Anytime we're thinking about roster management, roster moves, what's the value? How many wins would a player add? What do our salary cap scenarios look like? I'd say on average that's about a 60 to 70 PowerPoint presentation. Right? I mean, I think it's on average 60 to 70 that go through these scenarios.
Depends on how many years we're going forward.
Yeah, how many years? Are we looking just at this season, the next 3 seasons, 3 seasons? But I have people think, okay, business, you get all these long PowerPoints. I've had more PowerPoints, more packed with data than ever before in my life from these two guys in their department at the Clips.
This is fascinating, Steve, because I know in the government data we talk about, you don't look at forecasts. You specifically don't. But here, you need them to make decisions.
This is a different kind of forecast. I mean, the expected wins added, that's a forecast. And there's some other things that these guys do statistically. How long will a player with this background, how old age-wise, will that guy continue to be functional? And you just take a look and statistically match against other players with similar perspectives. So you're right, that is forecast. But in this case, instead of, I'm not just reporting the numbers like we do on USA Facts, we're trying to make decisions. The thing that is not the same kind of forecast is to look at our salary cap situation and roster possibilities. We don't know who's going to join us, but those are much more deterministic. This is what it looks like if so-and-so joins. This is what it looks like if, we trade so-and-so, we draft so-and-so. That's quite deterministic. There are a lot of scenarios to be thought through. There's a lot of roster moves that are counterintuitive, certainly to me, but are well known to these guys and the rest of many of our front office staff.
So if the three of you could pick only 2 or 3 stats when thinking about making a roster move or making an acquisition of a player, what would they be? What would be your desert island stats, if you will?
Ooh, man, that's putting me on the spot. Well, I think a lot of it is just driven. The NBA is a star league, so I think always taking into account the amount of cap space you have and the ability, whether the flexibility and ability you have to acquire those players. So future cap space, we always take into account and always make sure to kind of note that with any transaction.
That is salary cap.
Salary cap, yeah.
Sorry, yes. In terms of player statistics, I think you could go a lot of different ways. Certainly, I mean, just to keep it pretty basic and simple, shooting stats. Like if you're going to take one stat from the box score, like, you know, you see the teams that are really successful in this league. All of them are excellent, have excellent shooters and are excellent shooting teams. So targeting those type of players. We have more complicated metrics, some all-in-one metrics that I think do a decent job of capturing a kind of a player's overall value. But like when you break it down into kind of more detailed stats, I think we're almost keen on shooting. Shooting and passing.
But let me ask these guys about. I mean, the one when you're trying to think through a complicated move, the one that I always think of you guys talking about is wins above replacement value.
Yeah, no, I mean
What is that?
Greg can speak to that better than I can.
Greg writes the model.
No, you can talk.
No, go for it.
Go ahead, Greg.
We through different statistical techniques based on box score stats and what players play with, we try to kind of predict how many wins that they added to an average level team or a replacement level team, and based on that, you try to hopefully rank the players in an all-in-one metric. Sometimes it gets guys correctly, sometimes it doesn't. There's problems with every model, but it's kind of how that is. And yeah, probably that, and then how that ages is probably, in my opinion, like that and the salary cap are the two things I would look at for like boiling it down for one trade.
How about you, Steve? What would be your desert island numbers?
Well, it's interesting because I would say research and analytics is an input, but a lot of times when it comes to a roster move, then on top of that, because there'll be times these guys will, you know, the guys who are talking to me, Lawrence Frank, et cetera, will say, hey, analytics would have a slightly different view of what we should do in this case. And so we're trying to make our judgment because it's not just the numbers are an input, but they're not the sole determinant of what we do, with one exception, which is, you know, what can we do roster-wise going forward? And it's not always maximized for, you know, cap. It's also think through what does it take to win this year? How do we keep flexibility, or how do we give up flexibility because we think we got the right guys and we just want to double down? But there are sort of two numbers. There's got to be what about the future, and that gets you to thinking through, and it's not one number. It's this jigsaw puzzle that is the salary cap. That's how I think about it. It's a complicated chess game. And then for this year, there's really only one number I think about, and that's wins. It's just as simple as that. You know, going into this game, there's probably some statistic about, we got to guard so-and-so because that's the guy who's really going to break us down and blah, blah, blah. These guys would know that. Doc would know that. You know, I'm just looking at the score.
So we talked about acquisitions and player moves. When you're analyzing a box score, a basketball box score afterward, what's the first number that your eye goes to figure out what happened in that game?
Yeah, we were speaking about this a little bit before, but and just like I said, the shooting stats, I mean, that'll basically tell you, and Greg spoke to it too, where those shots are coming from is always key and aligns kind of with the percentage the teams are shooting. Where we're forcing shots from and where we're getting our shots from, whether they're assisted or not, those are always key.
So
I'll give you one other. Yeah. I look at turnovers pretty hard. I look at turnovers. I mean, I look at turnovers also pretty heavily. I mean, you can see how we shot. Sometimes that's because of good defense, sometimes not. These guys can dissect that. Turnovers, yeah, it might be because the other team's playing good defense, but I think of those as unforced errors.
Can you envision a scenario, Steve, where the data team behind the team results in the difference between a win and a loss because of an insight that they provide? Or is that just the stuff of Hollywood?
No, I think in any given game, insights will guide the way, you know, the coach makes. It's not the only factor, but you know, there's a couple keys that, you know, and certainly if you you look at playoffs, just look at playoffs. The books that these guys create for playoffs are unbelievable, highlighting what's going to work, what might not work, why, boom, doom, 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 doom. I mean, they're really quite extensive, and it gives the coaches a chance to see what's going on, or the ability to let our video guys really pull Because a lot of what gets communicated, it's not like the old days where they're the playbook. Nowadays, people are looking at video, and these guys will say, hey, these are the things, coaches will say, what about this? And these guys can take a look and see what's important, and then get the video guys to, actually, you guys can pull the video yourselves, I think, on that thing. So,
Does it happen in-game, or is it usually a post-game analysis informing the next game?
Generally, yeah, post-game analysis, pre-game and post-game analysis. We try to do no harm during the game, and I think not interrupt kind of what the coaches are seeing on the court as much.
Occasionally in-game we'll get hit, but it's like everything we're doing is to help ask the questions, and the coaches do a great job of asking the questions and then kind of studying them from all different viewpoints.
Got it. Well, I know you've got a game to get to, and you guys have a game to analyze. So thank you very much for joining us. This has been a good insight. Is there anything you'd want to add, Steve, that we didn't get to?
yeah. Go Clips!